Hello, today I'm in Bordeaux, in Saint Emilion, and I'm at the lovely Chateau Bellevue. Chateau Bellevue is a Grand Cru Classe, and we're about 2 kilometres to the west of Saint Emilion. And this is an estate whose vineyards sit on the limestone soils that are here. So a very typical terroir for Saint Emilion. So the one I'm looking at here is the 2012. Now, Chateau Bellevue's owners, the Pradel de Lavaux family, note that their ancestors have owned this property since 1642, when somebody called Jean Lacaze purchased the estate. The building I'm in is a 17th century chartreuse that had formerly been owned by the Carthusian monks. And the wine stayed in the hands of the Lacaze family till 1938, when it was passed to some other branches of the family, the Pradel de Lavauxs and the Connicks, who owned the chateau together. And this was the case until 2007, when Hubert de Bouard from the neighbouring Chateau Angelus bought out the de Conincks family. At the time this wine was being made, the estate was owned and run equally by the Pradel de Lavaux family and the de Bouards. The vineyards here are 100% Merlot. Evidently the last of the Cabernet Franc was pulled out in 2015. They feel that Cabernet Franc really doesn't work on these soils. Having said that, they have some fantastic resources of old Merlot planted here. Average vine age is about 40 years. The oldest vines were planted at the beginning of the 20th century. So there are vines here that are over 120 years old. The vineyards here are on a gentle southwest facing slope. And as I say, their key factor is this underlying limestone, which gives the Merlot a sort of a real energy, a vibrancy and an elegance. Improvements in the chateau and its wines started in about 2000, when two consultants, Nicolas Thienpont and Stephane Derenoncourt, were brought in to advise on the viticulture and the winemaking. The estate was embroiled in controversy in the 2006 reclassification of Saint Emilion. Since 1955, it had been a Saint Emilion Grand Cru Classe, but the 2006 reclassification didn't include Chateau Bellevue. Now, the owners of Chateau Bellevue didn't dispute this, however, other estates did, and eventually the 2006 reclassification was overturned. So, in fact, legally, it never happened. Chateau Bellevue was included as a Grand Cru Classe in the 2012 classification, which sort of underlies the fact that it was justifiable and it should never have lost its classification in the first place. Currently, the estate is entirely in the hands of the de Lavaux family, Hubert de Bouard having split a section of the vineyards away and added those to the vineyards of Chateau Angelus in 2022 and relinquished his ownership of any part of Chateau Bellevue. Again, though, perhaps that underlines the quality of the location of the vineyards here, in that they are contiguous with the neighbouring vineyards of Chateau Angelus. Winemaking here has varied over the years. Certainly, Hubert de Bouard did quite a bit of experimentation with fermentation in oak barrels. These were barriques with the tops knocked out. Today, fermentation goes on in a mixture of oak, cement tanks and stainless steel tanks. Production generally tends to include a certain amount of whole berries. It's very much aiming towards capturing the beautiful fruit here. The wine undergoes malolactic conversion in oak, which helps to marry the oak influence in the wine with the fruit from an early stage. And then the wine ages for somewhere in the region of 16 to 18 months in barrel prior to release. The 2012 vintage was generally quite a good vintage for Bordeaux, but it was hard work. It was a cold, quite rainy season, and the producers had to do a lot of work in the vineyards. The vintage was also quite late, so many of the better wines of the vintage are predominantly made from the earlier ripening Merlot, such as Chateau Bellevue, which I believe even for the 2012 is likely to be 100% Merlot. So let's take a look at it, shall we? Looking at the colour, the wine is a medium intensity of a sort of ruby red with more sort of brick red notes at the rim. The colour certainly suggests to me that this is fully mature. The wine is labelled as having 14% alcohol. Swirling it, it doesn't actually seem too ready to produce tears on the side of the glass. I guess that it's a wine that has softened out, its tannins have polymerized. There we go, eventually it is showing us some tears. So let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? The aromas have quite a distinctive, very mature, savoury note. To my mind, it almost sort of has a meaty element. There's an umami, a mushroomy, perhaps one might say truffle note. These are the aromas of a fully developed wine. There are some lovely high notes. There's some sort of red fruit there. Sometimes perhaps I get that sort of blood orange note, maybe slightly balsamic. But there is an elegant and lifted savoury tone, which also has some red fruit notes, perhaps red currant. All in all, mature and very attractive. So for taste. The wine's dry, medium-bodied, and has a little grip. It's not particularly dried out, but there is a sort of a dusty, velvety texture on the sides of my tongue that's enduring quite well. Beyond that, you're seeing some juicy, elegant red fruit that's being lifted by some quite fresh acidity. That acidity is in balance. There's perhaps a little bit of warmth coming from the alcohol at the finish, but that's not out of balance. That's just helping to give a little bit of weight and roundness to those really quite fine, quite dusty tannins. This is a wine that you could probably keep for another 5 or 6 years, but it's not something I'd be thinking would need aging in the long term. It's fully mature. It's very attractive now. I think 2012 was a vintage with a little bit of research where you can find some really nice wines that have been drinking now quite happily for the last 10 years. And although not completely past it, these wines probably are coming towards the end of their drinking window. In terms of a score, I looked at the Wine Searcher aggregated critic score for this. This is getting 91 out of 100. I think that's at about the right sort of level. It's a really enjoyable wine. It's not a great vintage, but it's producing some really lovely drinking. So thank you so much for joining me. I do hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you have, it would be fantastic if you could press the like button. If you're watching these videos and you're enjoying them, do please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. The more followers I have would really help me develop that further. I will, of course, leave a link to the page on the Wine Searcher website where you can see all the information about pricing, availability and price history for this wine. So it's well worth following that for more information. If you have any questions or comments, do please pop those in the comments box below. I'd really love to know what you think about the wines I'm looking at or the tastings I'm doing. So thank you again for taking the time to watch the video. And I do hope that maybe you'll manage to make some time and come and join me for another tasting in the very near future. Till then, bye for now.